All right, and we'll be good to go. So good afternoon again, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Today, we're going to go over month 3 of the certification process. I know that many of you, I recognize your names. I know that I've seen you guys before. You've seen me, you've attended some of these follow-ups. And other people, I know that some people that have gone through more recent trainings have signed up to these follow-ups in a weird order, meaning they signed up for month 3 before they signed up for month 1. So for those people, it may be a little bit harder to follow along. But as usual, I'm going to share the recording and I'm going to share any relevant materials to help you guys along. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And I have a few things opened up. Like I said, I'm going to share everything with you, but I wanted to go over what you're going to receive when I send you my follow-up email, what it is that you're going to see. One of the things that I'm going to send you is actually a link that I sent you guys when I sent you the email with the link for this meeting. I think it was yesterday that I sent it, and it's a link to a Google Drive folder. That Google Drive folder is really where all the information, all the relevant materials that I'll ever send to you will be centralized, meaning anything that I send to you, I've put in that folder already. So let me show you what that folder looks like. The link on the email that I sent you and the link on the email that I will send you as a follow-up tomorrow will take you to this Google Drive folder. You'll notice that there's different subfolders in it, each one of them for one of the months of follow-up. So all the relevant materials for month 1, lesson plans, guides, the certification requirements, you name it. Anything that I mentioned on the follow-up meeting for month 1 will be in that folder. Month 2, same thing. Month 3, that's what we're going over right now. And if you wanted to go ahead and venture into other months, let's say you have some time to kill and you want to look at the presentation, look what things look like for month 4, 5, 6, or 7, you can go ahead and do so from this Google Drive folder as well. Additionally, at the very bottom, there's these two like standalone files. One of them is called recorded OG sessions. I'm putting all the recorded links of all these meetings that I'm having and recording, I'm putting them there. So if you wanted to review it, or like I said, you wanted to see month 5 before you actually attend a live session, that's where all the links are. So you can go ahead and get acquainted with the content in those meetings. And this file called guided instruction log. I added this one quite recently, and I added it because I had several teachers reach out to me or to other trainers asking how to keep track of the direct instruction time that you guys have. As you know, for the certification, you have to submit a certain amount of lesson plans, a certain amount of videos, and you have to meet also a certain amount of usage in the software and also a certain amount of hours of direct instruction. And we didn't have a proper place where you could keep track of that direct instruction, that time that you are offline working with your students, doing those lesson plans, working on the content. So I put that simple file that you can just download, edit, add to it, remove to it, but it's going to help you keep track of those direct instruction hours that you need to do. So I'll go ahead and go into the folder for month 3. There's 3 files within that folder. One of them is a PowerPoint presentation. That's the one that I'm going to be focused on today, and I'm going to go slide by slide. And then there's 2 kind of Word documents. One of them is an empty template that you can use to write out your lesson plans. There's 2 lesson plans for this month, so you can use that template twice. And then there's a sample of a lesson plan for digraphs that has already been written out, so you can use it for reference and as an example of how or what your lesson plan should look like at the end of the day when you've already written it out. So having that said, I'll go back into my PowerPoint presentation and I'll start going over it. So, like I said, today we're going to focus on month 3 of the certification process. Month 3 deals with digraphs. So we're still dealing with phonics, meaning the content that we're going to go over today is somewhat similar to what we saw in month 2, sorry, for blends, and also month 1 for the alphabet. It's the same lesson plan, it's the same structure of the steps, but this time we're focused on digraphs. So the agenda for today, what we're going to talk about are the requirements, how to write those lesson plans, what those lesson plans entail, what materials you're going to need, how to share those files via Google Drive. I know that many of you have already started sharing those files. I know that some of you have just sent them as attachments through email. So I wanted to review the whole creation of a Google Drive folder component. Also, I wanted to review, and when I say review, it's because I mentioned this in month 1 and month 2, but review how you can enroll students into the program. And also, once they are enrolled, how you can adjust settings in their accounts. At this point, you've probably been using the program with your students for a little while, so there might be changes that you want to make. Give them access to things, remove access to things, move levels up and down. So I want to make sure that you guys remember how to do that. And then at the very end, I'm going to do a brief review again of the different reports that you can access. There's reports of usage and there's reports of progress. I'm going to show you a sample of each of those, specifically when it comes to the digraphs, what that looks like. And as usual, the last few minutes, I'm going to leave more of an open conversation format where we can ask questions. But of course, if you have questions along the way, feel free to stop me and ask as we go. So first things first, the requirements for month 3. And this, I took just a screenshot from the entire file that you have with month by month what you need to do. This, I just focused, for this slide, I just focused on month 3. Like I said, it has to do with digraphs. That's still within the phonics program, the Max Phonics, if you think about the software. And the digraphs is the last module of the Max Phonics program in the software. There's 4 modules. Digraphs is module 4. If you're thinking about your teacher manuals, this is what the cover of your teacher manual for digraphs look like. It's a kind of orange, yellowy type of color. And what you need to submit for the certification for this month is 2 lesson plans. One of them is for the SH, TH, WH, etc., the H brothers. And then you have the final sounds, the CK, NK, NG, and TCH. Remember when we say that you need to submit the lesson plans, you need to write out in every one of the boxes. That lesson plan needs to be fully filled in, except for the fluency, because remember that you do need an actual student to time them on the fluency. So that's the only thing that you can leave blank at this point. When you're submitting the lesson plans, if you're already working with a student and you have student work means any worksheet that they write on for any of the dictations that you do, whether it's sentences or words, everything that they write on, you can take a picture of, and that's considered student work. And then the third thing, the third item on this list of requirements is a video. The video says that you need to record an entire lesson plan and submit it via email or via Google Drive, rather. And when it comes to doing this video, remember that you don't have to do one big video of, a 1 hour long video if you're doing the entire lesson, because realistically, you're probably not going to do all 9 steps of the lesson in one sitting. So what I recommend is that you do short clips. A clip of step 1, a clip of step 2, a clip of step 3, and so on, or do a few steps together, but definitely you do not need to do all 9 steps in one video, because remember that we're very rarely, if ever, going to do the 9 steps in one sitting. So let's talk about those steps. Let's talk about the lesson plan and what it entails. This means what you should write out in your lesson plan template, and also when you're implementing the program or actually doing the lesson with your students, what items you should touch upon. And I added this little note at the bottom that I thought you might find helpful, that the lesson plan template can be found on the materials section of your teacher dashboard. It can also be found on that Google Drive folder that I just showed you. I put a template there, or you can find it on page 38 of your digraphs teacher manual, this one right here. So here I just went step by step. I copied what the template said, and I'm going to read those things over, make sure that we understand what each of the steps really translates to. So the first step is the visual drill. As you remember from previous months, the visual drill is where we use our sound cards. Let me actually put this down here. Where we use our sound cards that have letters in the front, a picture in the back, and we're going to use them to introduce the letters first, flip the card to introduce the picture that starts with that sound or those letters. And then we flip it over again to make the sound that this digraph makes. So the steps in the lesson plan, step 1 and all other steps, are the same as what we saw in month 1 and are the same as what we saw in month 2. The difference is the wording. Before we were talking about this is the letter P as in panda. Now we're going to be talking about these are the letters and they make the sound sh, for example. Yes, Esteban, you had a question? Oh, you're muted.
Yes, thank you. So I'm looking at what you have there, and maybe I missed something, but like last week I introduced the L ones.
Yeah, those are the blends.
Right. So
am I on the wrong one? Hold on. Is this
I'm sorry.
Let me see. Hold on a second.
I
might be wrong. Because I have a few of these this week, so I might have mixed them up. Give me a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is the stack. Maybe I have them out of order.
Okay, yeah, there we go. That's the thing. Yeah.
Okay.
These are the digraphs. Yeah.
Got it.
Pretty much.
All right.
To understand the difference, the way that I always remind myself, blends is when you have different letters that where you can hear each of the sounds in that blend. For example, the BL, you can hear bl, the B and the L. Here, you're going to have the digraphs that make just one single sound. So it's sh, one sound, 2 letters, 1 sound. So that's the difference between those. This meeting today is for month 3, which is the digraphs. But again, the steps are going to be the same. What's going to change is a wording, the wording here and there. So we have our sound cards. We are going to introduce letters first, then picture, then sound. And we're going to do this for each individual digraph in that group. So we're going to do the SH. Then we're going to go to the tactile portion of the SH. Tactile portion is step 2. That's where you trace the letters. Then we're going to go back to step 1 for the TH. And then we're going to do step 2, the tactile, the tracing for the TH. Then we're going to go back to step 1 for the WH, step 2 for the WH, step 1 for the CH, step 2 for the CH, and so on. Remember, steps 1 and 2 are the introduction to the letters, to the sounds that they make, to the picture that I'm associating it with, and the tracing of the letter. I do those one by one. In this case, digraph by digraph. And only then I move on to all the other steps, because all the other steps mix and match all these digraphs together. So I also wanted to mention a few pointers for your lesson and for your video. Make sure that you're always incorporating the I do, we do, you do format of delivering the lesson. What does that mean? I do is I am the teacher, or if you think about when you're using the software always introduces something first. That's the I do portion. I'm presenting it, I'm showing it to you. All you need to do is pay attention. Then comes the we do portion, where me and the student are doing it together. If you think of the software always says, now you try it, or something like that. So meaning you're doing it together, the student has a chance to repeat after you, say it along with you. You can still monitor, you can still provide feedback. And then the you do portion would be you, the student, saying the sound, the picture, and the letters independently. So it's always I do, we do, you do. teacher or demonstration, do it together, teacher and student, and then the student does it individually. So if I were to do step 1 for the SH, I would say, these are the letters SH, as in ship. They make the sound sh. Then would be the we do portion when we do the same thing, me and the student together. So these are the letters SH, as in ship. It makes a sound sh. And when I say it makes the sound, the digraph makes a sound. And then comes the you do portion, where I just ask the student, what are the names of these letters? What is the name of this picture? And what is the sound that this digraph makes? So again, same steps. What I changed a little bit is the wording that I used with each prompt. The prompts are letters, picture, sound, and I flip the card after each prompt. This middle section, by the way, with the SH, ship, TH, 30, WH, well, that's where your lesson plan is going to end up looking like. Let me show you what I mean. And remember, on the Google Drive folder, I said that I put an empty template for the lesson plan and a lesson plan that has already been written out. This is what it looks like. So pretty much what I did is take a screenshot of this portion of my lesson plan. And I did that for all the other steps. So on these slides, what we'll see are the instructions of what we need to do, a screenshot of what it's going to look like on my actual lesson plan, and then some tips, if relevant, at the bottom of the slide. So what I mentioned, tips-wise, we'll do the I do, we do, you do, and make sure that you make corrections to pronunciation as you go. You don't want to catch those mistakes or correct those mistakes in pronunciation later on. You want to catch them right then and there as you're introducing those sounds. And then when we get to step 2, remember, I'm going to do step 1 for SH, step 2 for SH, step 1 for TH, step 2 for TH. And step 2 is the tactile or the auditory tactile drill. That's where I show the students how to trace the letters. I'm also going to do it in that format of I do, we do, you do. I'm going to show it first, then we do it together, and then you do it on your own. And I'm going to start with big hand motions. Remember, finger in the air. And I'm going to trace the H by going around, turn, and around. And I'm going to do the H by going down, up, and hump. So same idea, same instructions on how to write each of the letters, but what changes now is that I'm doing 2 letters or 3 letters as opposed to just one individual one at a time. So if we read what the slide says, you show the students how to trace the letters by making big motions with your arm or finger in the air. Then you do it on a textured surface that can be salt, rice on a tray, that can be a Ziploc bag with paint, whatever it is that has some sort of texture will be fine. And we want them to do the same thing, around, turn, and around, down, up, and hump. And then they're going to do the pencil and paper and trace it. So there's 3 levels, if you will, to the auditory tactile, to the tracing. I do big hand motions, then I do finger on a textured surface, and then I do pencil, paper, and write it out. At every point on those 3 different methods or components of the tactile portion, I need to say the directions out loud of what I'm doing with my finger, what I'm doing with my pencil, because that helps the students really internalize the information so that eventually they don't have to remind themselves how to trace the S. It will become automatic and they'll just know S, I trace it automatically, like we all just trace letters without thinking about how to trace them. For the lesson plan and the video tips, like I said, do the I do, we do, you do components or format, and make sure that the instructions are repeated throughout. If you needed to go back to the instructions themselves, you don't remember how to trace the S or you don't remember how to trace the H, remember that you have resources that will help you with that, either on the material section of your dashboard or on your teacher manual. A few slides back, let me actually go back to that. Here, where I first introduced the lesson plan, you can see in the bottom that the lesson plan template is on page 38 of your digraphs teacher manual. So every page after that will help you throughout this lesson. So you'll find on page probably 41 or 42, you're going to have the tactile instructions that you'll use for this part of your lesson plan. So before I move on to step 3, remember that steps 1 and 2, the visual drill and the auditory tactile drill, are done for each digraph individually before we deal with any other steps. So if I'm moving on to step 3, it's because I already went through all of my cards for this group of sounds. I showed the students how to trace each of these letters, and we did it on paper. We did it with our fingers in the air. We did the I do, we do, you do, and now we're ready to mix these up together, which will take us to step 3 of the lesson plan. That is the sound dictation. Here we're going to dictate 10 digraphs to the students in random order, meaning I'm not going to follow the same order that the software presents the digraphs in, that the student's workbook has the digraphs in, because I don't want the students to just simply memorize that order. So I'm going to mix them in a different order and dictate them to my students. You can repeat digraphs, or you can include previous sounds that you've previously taught your students. You should say, the wording is, write the letters that make the sound sh, as in ship. Write the letter that makes the sound, the letters, sorry, that make the sound f, as in photo. And the students will write each of the letters or each of the letters in the digraphs on paper or in a notebook, or if they have the student's workbook, they have a page for that as well. And it is important that at this point, they also say the directions of how they're tracing those letters. If you feel that at this point it's no longer necessary for them to say it, to say the directions, they can trace it directly, then that's fine. What we definitely want to make sure of is that they're writing the proper letters for each of the digraphs. For your lesson plans and tips, like I said, it's better if they say the instructions, but you don't absolutely have to. And at this point, we can already start gathering our students' work. Remember, I said everything that the students write on, whether it's letters, whether it's words, whether it's sentences, all of that is considered students' work. So you can just simply take a picture of that and add it to your Google Drive folder, add it to your email that you're sending with your lesson plans to show proof of students' work for the sound dictation of these particular diagrams. Something that I forgot to mention. We have 2 lesson plans to submit this month and 1 video. You choose which of the 2 lesson plans you want to do. You don't have to do a video for both lesson plans, just one. You choose which one you want to do. Then we get to step 4, which is the sound blending and tapping. Remember that the sound blending is where I can use my sound cards, or I can use my alpha chips to form words. Oops, wrong side. To form words. Or you can use finger tapping to form the words if you don't have the alpha chips, or if you have too many students, or you can do both. It might be better to actually do all of the different ways of blending sounds into words, because this is usually where students really start to struggle. Generally, they're fine with identifying letters. They know their letters and sounds. They can identify them in isolation. But when you start putting sounds together, letters together, blends and consonants and vowels together, that's where the students tend to start to really struggle. So this is probably one of the exercises that you really want to spend more time on and have them practice. Have them do the alpha chips, have them do the finger tapping, have them do all of the above. So the instructions say, use alpha chips or finger tapping to have students form words and nonsense words. They will tap each of the letters as they are sounding them out, and then they will scoop or trace a line while blending that sound into words. You should say, for example, form the word chip. And there will be 1 tap per digraph. So that's one of the differences from month 1 and month 2. When we were talking about the sound blending for CBC words, or when we were talking about the sound blending for words that had blends in them, we were still doing 1 tap per letter. Here, the digraphs become, or all the letters in the digraphs rather, become 1 single tap. For example, if I'm blending the word chip, I would do ch, e, p, chip. For the blends, I would have done, let's say the word is, I don't know, blat, nonsense word blat. I would do b, at, blat. One tap per letter. Here, I'm going to do one tap per digraph. Sh, ed, shed. Ch, at, chat. If you're doing the alpha chips, same thing. The way that I don't have the right letters right now, but you would put on the table the alpha chips that form, or the letters that form the digraphs, they would be together. The second letter would be a little bit separate, and the other letter would be a little bit separate. I do one tap for the digraph, one tap for the next letter, one tap for the next letter, and then trace and or scoop to form the word. If you find, by the way, that you need more alpha chips because some letters are going to be repeated and your alpha chip set just has one letter of each, you can either get poker chips at the dollar store and make your own alpha chips. Or what I tend to do is I just take index cards, cut them in half, and with a Sharpie marker, I just make a bunch of different letters, and I use those as my letter cards to blend the sounds together. For your lesson and for your video tips, remember that the students should tap out the words and say that out loud as they blend those sounds together into a word. And ideally, like I mentioned, your video should include both the alpha chips or the letter cards that I just mentioned and the finger tapping. Then we get to step 5, which is the fluency. For the fluency, you're going to use the list of words that you can get from the material section or from your student's workbook. Easiest way to get it is from the material section. And you're going to time each of your students individually for 60 seconds. You're going to have them read continuously as long as those 60 seconds are running. And you're going to keep track of how many words they're reading correctly or incorrectly. At the end of that minute, at the end of those 60 seconds, you're going to give them a score. That score will be how many words they read correctly. Remember that the fluency is the one part of your lesson plan that you might have to leave empty if you're not currently working with students that are at the digraphs level. Remember that what we definitely want you to submit as soon as possible is the lesson plans themselves so that you can get feedback, so that you can see if you're on the right track. But the fluency you can leave for later on when you actually have a student that you're working with. And remember, the score is the amount of words that the student read correctly. Whenever you see anywhere in the program, whether it's in a manual, in a student's workbook, or in the software itself, whenever you see the letters WPM, that stands for words per minute. So it always has to do with the fluency exercise. For the lesson tips, I highly suggest that you do a practice run of reading the words before you're actually timing the students. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming for students when you put, a whole bunch of words in front of them and you're telling them that you're going to time them and they need to read as fast as possible, but as accurately as possible as well. So you might want to do a trial run when you're reading with the students and then time them. For your students' work, when you're submitting it, what you can submit for the fluency, it's the list of words itself. And you can also submit the tracking chart. Let me remind you where you can find that. Of course, you can find it on your teacher manual, but also if you go to the material section, let me bring this over here. If you go to the material section of your teacher site, remember that you have the phonics where you can find the template teacher samples that have been sent to us. And then every other file has a number at the beginning. That is the number of the step in the lesson plan that this material goes along with. So everything that starts with the number 5 has to do with the fluency. That's where you'll have that tracking chart, the expectations of how many words should be read, the words themselves that you can just print out and put in front of the students for them to read. If you don't have the student workbook, if you can't find it on your teacher manual, this is the easiest, quickest way to get to all the materials that you'll need. So back to here. After the fluency, we get to step 6, which is sight words. We're going to introduce sight words by writing them in red on index cards. So they're going to end up looking like this. We always spell sight words. We don't sound them out because for the most part, sight words don't make sense if you sound them out. So we just need to spell them and have the students spell them back and make their own cards. This is also part of the student's work that you can take a picture of and submit along with your lesson plan. So you can use this method of red Sharpie or red pen and write the words on an index card, and you tell the student this is the word were, W-E-R-E, were. They do it themselves, they make their cards, and then eventually they're going to have a little stack of sight words that they can always review and work on. Another method that we use for the sight words is that red crayon and the plastic canvas, where you can put a paper or an index card on top of it, or you can fit this in between pages of a notebook. And when the students trace with their crayon on top, you would say, this is a word with, W-I-T-H, with. So when they're writing it down, they feel those little bumps as they're writing. And if they run their finger on top of the letters that form the word, they'll also feel that texture. Remember that tactile components really help information stick to the brain. That's why you'll see a lot of tapping, a lot of tracing, a lot of touching, because that really helps the students with understanding and retaining the information. So this is one way. This is another way. And the other one, which is probably the easiest because you don't need any material, is the arm tapping. Remember, when it comes to sight words and the arm tapping, what we're doing is one tap on my arm per each of the letters, and then I'm blending them into a word. This is where I'm sounding out the letters. Here I'm spelling the letters. So if the word is were, I would say W-E-R-E, were. I see there's a question in the chat box from Esteban. I'm going to share it with everybody. If you're working virtually, I found a really cool tool which could take the place of the alpha chips, and he put a link there. By all means, the internet can be your best friend when trying to come up with additional activities. What I tend to do, but that's just because I like PowerPoint and I'm very comfortable with PowerPoint. So I do a whole bunch of different presentations and games with PowerPoint, and I make letter tiles. If you go into some of the different folders that I said I shared with you on that Google Drive big file, you'll find some of those. So definitely, you know, when you feel like, okay, I can do the sight words this way, or I can do the sound blending this way, but I feel like my student might need a little bit more of an interactive component, ask the internet. The internet knows, and it will definitely give you good ideas, as long as you're following the basic OG components and what the step is calling for. In this case, as long as you're teaching the sight words, spelling them out, making sure that the student is making their own deck of cards, you can add more drill and practice. That's never going to hurt your students. So when it comes to sight words, remember that you have a suggested list of sight words that you can get from the material section of your dashboard. When it comes to sight words that appear in your teacher manual or in the student workbook or in the software, it's going to be the same 2 to 5 or 6 sight words that are repeated throughout in the manual, in the student workbook, and in the software. But on the material section, you can find additional ones. You don't have to just stick to those 2 to 6 words that Max Scholar has. In fact, I encourage you to use different ones and more. Sight words are common words. You want to make sure that you're constantly introducing more and more and more. And a little tip for your video, I suggest that you include all of the different formats that I just mentioned for going over sight words. The index cards with my red Sharpie, the plastic canvas where I can trace with a red crayon on top of it, and the arm tapping where I'm spelling the word. Then we get to step 7. That's the spelling dictation or the word dictation and SOS. SOS, remember, it's explained in detail in your teacher manual, but it's simultaneous oral spelling. Pretty much, you're going to have a word that you want your students to write. So you're going to tell them, write the word chip. They're going to say the word back to you. That's a simultaneous oral spelling. They're going to say the word back to you. And then you're going to ask them, how many sounds do you hear? And then they're going to tap it out before writing it on a piece of paper. When they're writing on a piece of paper, remember that that becomes students' work that you can submit. And here on the tips at the bottom of the page, I just explained, or I just wrote out what I just said. You say the word, count the sounds, tap the word, and then write it down. I see a question, can we use a different method for the sensory for the spelling other than the bumpy plastic? Yes, you definitely can. What I meant by try to do all of them is don't just stick to one method of teaching the sight words. Don't just do the index cards, or don't just do the arm tapping. Do different ones. If you find other ones, and I know that many teachers have their own methods of, going over sight words in the classroom, by all means, continue doing that and just add to what you're doing. You can definitely use different ways. Like I said, if you find cool resources that will keep your students more engaged, by all means, include them. As long as you're hitting what the step is requiring for you to do, we're fine.
I noticed you did it differently than the, like writing it in the air, like you did it on your arm.
Yes.
Is there a thought behind that? Like, does it just differentiate, or does that still work if we're spelling it in the air? So
for the tracing in the air, we're usually doing that for individual letters or individual sounds. For example, this is the digraph SH, and the letters SH is what I'm tracing in the air, not necessarily a word. It can become, and this might just be my opinion, it can become maybe confusing for the students to trace an entire word in the air without them seeing it. Maybe if they're doing it on, on a piece of paper, not on a piece of paper, sorry, on the textured surface, like salt on a tray and things like that, then it can still work because they're still seeing the word being traced. But the difference between tapping here and tapping here or tracing it is that here I'm spelling. When I'm doing this, I'm sounding out the letters. When it comes to the tactile, it depends on what you're using it for. Because if you're using it to blend sounds together, then that would be the equivalent of doing this. If you're using it to spell the words, then that would be the equivalent of doing that. Therefore, that's where I'm trying to get to, that it might be confusing, because how do I know if that is words that I spell or words that I sound out? When I'm focusing on the tapping, I know that this is sounding out, this is spelling the words, and I know that sight words I must spell. You know what I mean?
Right. Can you show me how you do it one more time?
Yeah. So you extend your arm, and you're going to do one tap in the order of how the letters appear in the word. So let's say the word is the, you would do T, H, E, the.
Got it.
If I was, let's say it's a CVC word that I'm blending the sounds together, let's say the word is pat, I would do p, at, pat. In theory, I could also do this. I could do p, at, pat. But on purpose, we use this for sounding out, this for spelling. So we make that differentiation, that distinction, that some words I sound out, some words, sight words, I just spell. Because you'll find that many of the sight words you cannot spell. Sound out, for example, this one. You can sound it out. It doesn't make sense when you sound each letter individually. Or the, you would do t, eh. That doesn't give you the word the. So that's the reason why we do it in two different ways separately, so that there's no confusion with the word formation or the just reading the word by seeing it and identifying it.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. No problem. So now we get to step 8 of the lesson plan. That's sentence dictation and COPS. COPS, remember, it's also in your teacher manual explained in detail, but it's a self-check strategy for when students are writing a sentence, writing a paragraph, writing in Max Scholar, or writing anywhere else, I recommend that you introduce this strategy. It's very useful and kind of self-empowering for the students as well. It's where you, well, actually, let me go through the step and then through the cuts. So you're going to dictate 5 to 10 sentences for the students, and they're going to write them down. You want to make sure that you're using the digraphs that you're covering in this lesson, so words with those digraphs. You want to make sure that you're using the side words that you just introduced a few steps ago. You always want to make the lesson plan be cohesive in that way, and that every step that you introduce is somewhere or somehow referring to or building on what was done before. So I'm doing side words, I'm doing words, and I'm doing sentences. Those sentences should include those words and those side words. Not exclusively, you're obviously going to need to add more words to make sentences that make sense, but you definitely want to incorporate at least some of those side words and at least some of those words. So you're going to come up with the sentences. The sentences are not anywhere. You have to come up with those. And then you have the students repeat the sentence back to you. You ask them how many words they hear, and then they're going to write it down. Once they write it down, that's when the COPS strategy comes in. I wrote the sentence, and then I go back and check for COPS. COPS is capitalization, organization, punctuation, and spelling. So I just go, did I capitalize where I needed to? Did I organize the words in the proper way that I heard them in the sentence? Did I use punctuation? Did I spell my words correctly? So they can circle or identify their mistakes, rewrite the sentence, and then submit it to you. So it's an extra step for them to ensure that they're doing really the best that they can. And like I said, it's self-empowering because when they find their own mistakes and they're able to correct them, it really makes them feel like they're getting it, like they're doing better. And it's going to save you some time because they already did some self-correction before turning in the work to you. And remember, anything that they write is students' work that you can submit. And then we get to, here I forgot to change the title. The title should be Control Readers. And that is the last step of our lesson. So that's step 9, where we're going to have a short story that we want the students to read. If you have students that are a little bit more advanced, you might want to time them on the control readers as well, not just on the fluency. Otherwise, your goal is just for them to be able to read a sentence and read a short story. And again, you should have some of those sentences, some of those side words, some of those words that you've introduced in this lesson plan. You have control readers in the software, you have control readers in your teacher manual, in your students' workbook. I recommend that you come up with your own story so that you can be a little bit more creative and also flexible as to what words you're going to introduce. Make it easy if your students need it to be easy. Make it harder if your students can handle a little bit more. And remember, on the material section of your teacher dashboard, you have a lot of supporting materials, including samples that teachers have sent us with their own control readers that they've allowed us to share and you can reuse. So those are the 9 steps of the lesson plan. Like I said, same 9 steps that we saw in month 1 and month 2. The wording changes a little bit. Right now, the concept of a digraph, which is 2 letters or 3 letters that make just one single sound. Now we'll also have, for the second lesson plan, is the ending sounds, the CK, the NG, the TCH. So the wording is going to change even more because it's words that end with a sound as opposed to start with a sound. But again, the lesson plan, the logic is the same. So now let me remind you how you can share files via Google Drive. If you've shared them already, then you know what to do. If you've shared your lesson plan so far via email or any other way that is not via Google Drive, I recommend that you go back and compile all of your work there, because at the end of the school year or at the end of the 7-8 months that you're going to be taking this course, then it's going to be hard to go back fishing for your initial lesson plans from the beginning of the year. So make sure that you compile them all now, and then you have that Google Drive folder where you just add things into it. My recommendation is that, let's say right now you start working on your month 3 assignments, you finish them in 2 weeks, you're ready to submit them. Add them to your Google Drive folder. What I do suggest is shoot a quick email like, hey, I added my month 3 assignments to my Google Drive folder. just to make sure that we're aware that you updated it and we go and check it. So I'm not going to go into these step by step. Remember, I'm going to share this presentation with you. I technically shared it with you already, but I'll share it again with you tomorrow. So you will be able to go step by step on how to create a folder if you haven't done so, how to share that folder with somebody else, and how you can just go back and add more files, videos, pictures, lesson plans, documents, whatever it is, to that same Google Drive folder. It's going to make it easier for you and for us to keep track of what you've submitted. And very important, make sure that this is the address that you're sharing that Google Drive folder with, ogcertification@gmail.com. If you've shared it with somebody else, maybe your trainer, that's fine. You don't have to unshare it, but make sure that this address is also on the shared list. This is where we're centralizing everybody's assignments. So it's going to be easier to keep track of it that way. And again, a quick review on how you can enroll students into the program. On that Google Drive folder that I keep mentioning that I'm sharing with you is a guide walking you through every step of the way, enrolling students and editing students' accounts, but I briefly wanted to point out the basics. When you log into your account, you go to settings for students, you click create new. That gives you a little form that you can fill out. You give the student the username that you want. You put the first name, last name, grade, reading level, if you have it. And then you can adjust any settings right then and there, whether you want them to take a placement test or not, whether you want them to have access to other programs like Max Reading or not. And then that account is good to go as soon as you create it. This is what that form looks like. If you get a message, and I know that that's come up recently, not necessarily by anyone in the group right now, but you might have encountered it or might encounter it in the future. If the system tells you that all of your licenses have been taken up, shoot us an email. Maybe somebody enrolled more than they should have, because each of you gets at least one student account associated with your training. For many of you, I know that your schools or your districts purchased additional ones. So if you see that you cannot add the students that you know you want to add or need to add, reach out to us and we'll make sure that those things are settled. And this is just written words from what I just said, that once you create the account, you can adjust the settings, what you want them to do or not do, what you want them to have access to or not. And the guide, this link actually that I added here on this slide will take you to that guide that I mentioned with step-by-step instructions on how to create an account and how to change or modify existing accounts. Then the last thing that I wanted to mention was a brief review of the reports. Remember that there are reports of usage. Those are the ones that I always look at first. I know that when you log in, the first thing that you see is progress monitoring, and you're probably going to want to go into that first. I personally recommend that you look at the usage first, because that will give you an indication as to how much time your students are spending on it. And usually the time correlates with how much progress they'll be showing. So if you see that a student is not logging in as much as you thought they were, if you see on the scores that they're not mastering certain things, then that is a student that it would make sense that they're not showing much progress. But if you look at the progress first and don't see progress, you're going to be alarmed. However, looking at the usage first sometimes gives you a good indication as to what to expect when it comes to the progress. So you'll see the usage, you'll see the scores, and you can see a really detailed breakdown of what exactly the students are doing with that time. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? And this is also explained on page 23 of your digraph teacher manual. You have step-by-step how to generate the reports and what they show you. Same thing with the progress reports. The difference with the usage, or between the usage and the progress reports, is that usage is everything that happens in a student's account, good, bad, mastery or not. The progress only will show you, give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Let me mute my computer here. Okay. So usage is everything that happens, the good and the bad. Progress is growth. So if a student is stuck on a lesson in the phonics, let's say, and it's stuck in a lesson, they're not going to show progress, because only when I master sounds that becomes progress. That's the difference between those two. And that's why I pull up the usage first to see, are they failing things? Are they mastering things? And then I go into that progress. Let me show you what this looks like when you're actually on the site. I pulled up here some examples from a random school. What I'm showing right now is a usage report. You can see here on the left that I'm on the usage report for a particular student. I went into the phonics section, and again, you have step-by-step instructions on that Google Drive folder that I'm sharing with you guys again tomorrow on how I specifically got to this screen. But I'm looking at the usage report for phonics, specifically for the blends, although you can focus on the digraphs or alphabet if they've done those sections. And you can see what sounds they're going over, what they're mastering or not. Check mark means mastery. X's means not mastery. And when you see different numbers next to those check marks or X's, that is the amount of attempts that the student has done or has taken at that particular sound or that particular drill. So when you see here that the student for the CL, I'm looking at the blends, not the digraphs, but when you see that this student had 3 attempts to get the phonemic awareness right for the CL and had 3 attempts to get the phoneme recognition right for the CL, you know that those are struggle areas. Whenever you see a check mark and a 1, it means that the student got it right on the first attempt. So that's ideal case scenario. 2s are fine, 3s are fine, 4 is already a cause of concern, because that means that the student has failed the same question associated with the same sound 4 times and it's still getting it wrong. So the student is being prompted to repeat that lesson over and over. Your student's going to get frustrated, and evidently the software is not being enough for them to move forward. So that's where your guided instruction comes in. That's what will really make the difference when you provide that additional drill and practice. So this is, again, the usage report. If we look at a progress report, this is what it would look like. So you can see the modules that they're on and how many sounds within each module that they have mastered. Here you'll also see check marks and X's, but in this case, these are tendencies. So the student tends to get the phonemic awareness wrong, or tends to struggle with the phonemic awareness, tends to struggle with the phoneme recognition, but doesn't tend to struggle with other exercises or other skills that they're going over. And on the last page of this slide, before I open up the floor for questions or comments, the last page of the slide, of the slideshow, of the PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to be sharing with you, has a link to that Google Drive folder that I keep mentioning. You're going to see folders for each month, going to the month that you're interested in, and you're going to see videos, templates, lesson plans, the presentations that I use for every month. So if you need to go back to review, you can. If you want to go ahead, because you already did your digraphs, you're ready to take on Clover next month, you can go ahead and do that as well. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and, like I said, open up the floor for questions, comments, any clarification that you guys might need. I'm here for you all. If you don't have questions, you're free to go. Thank you for coming. Otherwise, I'm all ears. Carrie, you had something?
Yes. I had wanted to know, when I first picked my student, I picked somebody that was a special ed student because I'm in the classroom as a special ed teacher in a gen ed room, that I felt like that's what, admin would want, is for me to pick one of my students, especially since I had to be with them for the time period, that if I ever had to pull one to work with, it would be one of those students. But the need really is more with another student. And now that student is going to be getting an IEP. So I
Mhm.
wanted to know, I have not started with my recording yet and working with the students. I've just had my lesson plans put in, and I wanted to know if I can switch the student that I had chosen, or should I stick with the same one?
Yes,
Okay.
you can switch, and in many cases, you're gonna have to switch because the person that you're doing the consonants and vowels with might not be the same person that you're doing syllabication with.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
one student that I have now, like that I'm thinking of, he's not able to even write letters and numbers. So I feel like this would probably be more beneficial for a student like that to like start right from the beginning instead of,
Yeah,
we have the other student is probably, on grade level or close to grade level. So
yeah,
wouldn't get as much of a benefit from the early on stuff.
yeah. You can definitely switch. On the Google Drive folder, I keep mentioning that step-by-step instructions on how to enroll students and all of that. That also has instructions on how to deactivate an account. When you deactivate that account, that seat becomes available for you to assign it to somebody else.
I see.
What I definitely recommend is that you take the usage, whatever usage you might have, even if it's a little bit, write it down from the student that you will deactivate. We can always retrieve it later on, but just so that you have a record of how many hours or how many minutes you've already had with that
Yeah.
student and the new one.
Okay, I haven't started it with the student yet. I only did the
Okay.
lesson plans because
Okay,
it's all kind of like in the works, and I had questions on how I was going to do
yeah.
the videoing anyways. So is anybody running into issues with videoing themselves from like a laptop and then emailing it to your email and then like uploading from the drive? Like if the length is long, like I don't know how is everybody doing that, like with videoing and then uploading and all that.
That I'll see. For this group, I don't know if many of you have started the videos. I'll tell you my tips, and then if anybody has more comments, by all means, do share them with us. But what I usually see with teachers is that they use their phones to record just because it's usually faster and because it's usually easier to share it directly via email or directly with the Google Drive. When you do it from a computer, many times you have to convert the recording, then the file is too big for you to attach it to an email. So you can do either or. If you see that the file is too big and it's becoming tricky for you to share it, Google Drive should let you share it. Otherwise, last resort is upload it to YouTube as a private video and share the link to the YouTube video with us.
Do you need like a YouTube account for that? Like, should I?
Yeah, but you can make one with like your school email
Okay.
and just use it for that purpose and then close it out.
Okay.
And when you upload the video, you have the option to select if you want it to be public or private, just do private, and they give you the link. And if you want, Carrie, I can send you, or we can set up a quick call, you and I separately, so I can walk you through that.
Yeah, because when we were remote, I had uploaded to a different platform. And then it went to my co-teacher at the times. We went to her like YouTube account or whatever. So we just did it differently. But now I don't have access to that third-party thing since
Gotcha. Then Google Drive should be a pretty safe, a pretty safe way to do it, because Google Drive, I know that it can handle pretty heavy files. So it's just a matter of sharing the file just like you would share the lesson plans themselves. Just share the video. You just need to make sure that you know where it is on your computer.
So when I record on my phone, I don't then send it to my email. I try and send it directly to Google Drive.
Yeah,
Okay.
usually smartphones, all of them have that. If you have your, Google Drive set up on your phone, when you choose to share, you're gonna have share by email, share by text, share by whatever, or share by Google Drive.
Okay, I'll try that then. All right, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you so much. It was very informative.
Thank you, Esteban.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. I'll close my webcam, guys, but again, I'll be here if you have any question. Hi, Sherry.
Hi. So are you recording still?
Let me stop the recording. I think I remember your name. Did we speak on the phone?